Good morning. My name is John Cunningham. I'm a public education coordinator for Donate Life Tennessee. Today, a special guest, Raichon and myself, are going to educate you all on the transplant process, some of the moving parts, how to register, what that means, and just what the gift of life means. And that's what the title of our presentation is all about. Hope lives in Hendersonville. And let's meet our speakers. We'll let Raichon speak about herself a little bit.
Hi, everyone. Like John said, I am Raichon. I've worked for the state for 20 years and for TennCare specifically for 15. I am a proud wife to my husband, Tom, and mom to my daughter, Sophia, who is 16 and a junior at Station Camp High School. And if you're familiar with the Mandisa song, Overcomer, that is the soundtrack to my story. And so I always add that to my tagline there. So I am an overcomer.
Yeah, and a little bit about me right there. You see my wife there, Jessica Cunningham. A lot of you probably know her. She is a senior accountant at the city of Hendersonville office. She's been there for a little bit over a year, so she's going to watch this at some point. How you doing? Hey, good to see you. Yeah, we've been married 9-10 months. It's always interesting. 2 weeks after we got married, there was a mandatory stay-at-home policy in place. So we've had a fun year. It's been great. That's my puppy dog, Ollie. He may be in at some point during this presentation. He usually lays in the bed behind me. And of course, biggest reason why I'm here, I'm a champion for organ donation. I've been with Donate Life Tennessee for a little over 2 years now. So I've had the extraordinary opportunity to work in communities across the state to raise awareness, educate on the transplant process, and get to work with beautiful people like Raichon. So a little bit more about us. That first question there, what is an OPO? An OPO is an organ procurement organization. There are 58 OPOs across the United States, and the OPO that services this area is Tennessee Donor Services. So when I'm speaking about Tennessee Donor Services, we're really talking about the clinical aspects and the boots on the ground, working with hospitals and transplant centers to ensure everything throughout the transplant process is conducted legally, ethically, and of course in a medically sound fashion so that those recipients in need can get the life-saving treatment and transplant they need, and that the donors and donor families are properly cared for, honored, and respected. So Donate Life Tennessee's role in our mission, simply put, is to educate, raise awareness, and to allow the general population the opportunity to register as organ and tissue donors. So we have offices across the state. I work in our Nashville office, offices in Chattanooga, Knoxville, Johnson City, West Tennessee. We service 84 counties in Tennessee, so the overwhelming majority working in schools, with employers, also with the Department of Safety. We'll talk about that some more, and also with our county clerks across the office. So working here in Sumner County with Bill Kemp and his employees. Our mission, whether it's an online presentation like we're doing right now, or staff working in an OR of a hospital, is saving and improving lives. It permeates everything we do. Historically, there's always been, I suppose, some misinformation, or maybe just not clear, definitive information that people had, unless they were really impacted by donation or were in the medical field. So we're going to talk about some of the facts. The most common question I received is, if I register, will I receive proper medical treatment? Of course. If you're sick or injured and go to the hospital, medical professionals do everything they can to save your life. The doctors who work to save your life are not the same doctors involved with the organ and tissue donation and transplantation process. So whether it's a primary care visit, whether it's an emergency situation, doctors, nurses, they're not, filling a patient and saying, hey, let's talk about donation. They're looking to treat, help, heal, and save. Donation is not even a consideration until all life-saving treatment has been exhausted. Another question we hear pretty often, or expenses surrounding donation. The local organ procurement organization, so Tennessee Donor Services, pays for all hospital expenses related directly to the donation process. So when we're talking about the donor. So for those donors and donor families, all expenses relative to the donation process are covered by the area OPO. And then finally, a pretty common question we hear is regarding religious organizations and their stance on organ, eye, and tissue donation, whether or not my church or whatever my belief system may be, whether or not they support donation. And we deep dive into this on some of our trainings. However, as far as official stances across the board, really globally, when you dig into it, almost all, if not all, belief systems do support organ and tissue donation as the most charitable act almost somebody can participate in. And if this is something you do have questions about, when I talk to my students in classrooms, I always just encourage them to speak with somebody they trust, whether it's a parent or a faith leader, but just to talk to them regarding that. So looking at the national need, in the United States, there are actually, as of today, over 108,000 people currently waiting. Every 10 minutes, a new name is added to the national transplant list. So roughly since I started speaking, somebody has been added to the list. Tennessee has over 3,000 individuals in need of an organ transplant, and 22 people do die every day waiting for a life-saving transplant. So almost on the hour, someone passes away. And we always use, or at least I always use this example on the right here of Neyland Stadium to give you perspective on what the need looks like. Go Vols. It's been a rough year. Maybe one day we'll be good again. But Neyland Stadium holds 102,455 people. It's one of the largest venues in the country. And it can't even hold the current amount of people waiting for a transplant in the United States. So the next time you're watching a game, really think about just what that means and how many people are in need of a life-saving transplant. And just quickly, what that information looks like. As of October 26th, and Raichon and I are recording today, it's October 27th, 108,627 people are waiting. You see there on the left, most waiting for a kidney, followed by the liver, and then the heart. And in Tennessee, 3,048 people are currently waiting for the gift of life. And again, while the numbers are different, the relative percentages are quite similar. Most are waiting for the kidney, followed by the liver, and then the heart. So how can we impact change? How can we help those waiting? Well, the decision to register as an organ and tissue donor can have a huge impact on those in need. One donor can potentially save 8 lives and improve 75 or more through tissue donation. And these are the organs we're discussing when we think about organ donation. So 6 organs listed here, 8 potential recipients. So we have 2 lungs, and there can actually be multiple recipients. So 2 potential recipients from 1 lung donor, the liver, intestines, heart, pancreas, and the kidneys. And again, as in the case of the lungs, the kidneys can be donated to multiple recipients as well. So 2 kidneys, 2 potential recipients. Tissue donations. We said 75 or more people could be impacted positively through tissue donation. Tissue donation is extremely fascinating. There's so many different implementations. We're just going to talk about some of the fundamental and basic ones. You have the corneas and the scleras. The cornea is a clear outer covering of the eye. In 2019, over 60,000 corneal transplants were performed in the United States, helping restore vision to, as you heard, a multitude of people. Skin grafts, primarily used with patients who have suffered significant burns, can help reduce infection, which is the leading cause of mortality, as well as improve healing, reduce scarring, and reduce scarring overall. Bone grafts are also another implementation and possible tissue donation and transplant. Veins, heart valves, thinking of Sumner County, I was actually working in Gallatin High School a little over a year ago. And when I talked about heart valves, a student in class raised her hand and said when she was 2 days old, she received a heart valve transplant. So that's something right down the road from us when we think about people impacted by tissue donation. Even at 2 days old, and now she's a sophomore or junior in high school, I suppose. And it was because somebody made that decision to selflessly donate to someone in need. Tendons and ligaments, very common implementation, kind of textbook thing we think about are for ACL repairs. Sometimes donor tissue is used to reconstruct and rebuild those ACLs for recipients. And then nerve transplants as well. So again, just so many different implementations. When you dig into tissue donation, there's a lot you can see, but these are some of your fundamental and basic we consider when we talk about tissue donation. So pathways to donation. Donation after brain death, after circulatory death, and then living donation. We don't actually at Tennessee Donor Services facilitate the living donation process. However, we're huge supporters of living donation. So what is donation after brain death? Brain death is the irreversible cessation of brain activity, including the brain stem. So the brain ceases to function. In a clinical examination, you'll see the absence of all brain function, lack of spontaneous movement, no eye opening. Some of the common causes are impact or trauma, oxygen deprivation, an aneurysm, some internal injury. There on the right, you see a really good illustration of the brain in a few different states. You have the healthy functioning brain on the left. As you can see the activity. In the middle, there's that brain dead brain where there is no functioning whatsoever. And then finally in the comatose state, while there is functioning, not to the degree of a healthy active brain. But important to note that on the right in that comatose state, you're not considering donation. We're only talking about donation in the case of brain dead donors. Donation after circulatory death, not nearly as common as cases of donation after brain death. And when I say not as common, roughly 20% of deceased donation cases are cases of DCD. It's an option provided to the family only after the family has decided to withdraw mechanical support, terminally extubate, or move to comfort care. Patient remains under the care of the hospital. The OPO works in conjunction with the hospital to ensure appropriate testing and or therapies are completed, and then again, potentially able to recover kidneys, liver, pancreas, lungs, and tissue. So it's just a snapshot of what donation after circulatory death means. So kind of a bird's eye view of the actual organ donation process. The hospital identifies a potential donor and contacts the OPO when a patient meets clinical indicators. At that point, evaluation occurs. Clinical staff will evaluate each patient to determine suitability via phone or an on-site visit. And of course, at that time, clinical exams, evaluating past medical histories, serologies, blood tests, diagnostic studies to determine if this person meets the criteria to be able to potentially donate. A hugely important aspect of what we do is are the family care coordinators and their responsibility. So family care coordinators are responsible for identifying the patient's donor designation. So is this person registered, will, or an advance directive, or have they not for that matter? And family care coordinators are going to work with families, work with hospitals, just to ensure that process is conducted properly and ensure that, the family is properly also, supported throughout this time. So what does authorization mean? What's that look like to us? For minors 15 or older, you can register. However, in the event that donation could potentially take place for a minor. A legal guardian will ultimately have the final say in that. If you are 18 or older and registered, so a legal adult, that is express consent, first person authorization, so that identifies your registry status. So you have registered as an organ and tissue donor. If you are not registered, regardless of your age, in the event that donation is a possibility, the family or whoever can make the decision on behalf of the deceased will be approached by family care staff to start the process of determining whether or not they would like to move forward with the donation process. And legal consent has to be obtained before donation can actually take place. A few things that go into the matching process when identifying potential recipients for a donor in place. Blood and tissue type, body size plays a role. I use myself as an example. I'm a pretty big guy, but probably my best genetic match on the planet is my sister. She's 5'2", 110. So while we're great genetic matches, her heart probably wouldn't adequately function in my body, or literally my lungs might not properly fit her diaphragm. So that's just an example about how body size plays a role. How sick somebody is also a variable in where they're going to be on the waiting list. So if Raichon and I have been waiting for a transplant the same amount of time, but it's determined that I'm sicker, for that matter, than she is, then that would place me theoretically ahead. So that's just kind of an example. However, when you look at time spent waiting, if she had been waiting 3 more years than me, and we're similar, and our health is similar, she's going to be ahead of me when it comes to the waiting list. Then the actual recovery, the donor patient is taken to the hospital operating room where organs are surgically recovered by a transplant surgeon. The transplant surgeon is an employee of the transplant center, not the OPO. And following recovery, the organs are transported to the transplant center where they are transplanted to that recipient in need. Just quickly, when we think about how important time is relative to donation in the transplantation process, following recovery, the heart is viable for transplant for roughly 4 to 6 hours, whereas you can see each organ has, a certain amount of time relative to how long it can be viable. For instance, the kidneys for up to 48 hours. And sometimes you'll see variances and different on exactly what those numbers might look like, but that gives you a good idea. So time is certainly of the essence to get those recipients their life-saving treatment, but also keeping in mind a donor or the donor and the donor's family who is waiting to receive and honor their loved one. The tissue donation process, so very much similar. Just looking at the kind of highlights here. Again, the hospital contacts the OPO before the family leaves the hospital within 1 hour of every death, regardless of past medical history, age, or race. Every death is reported to the OPO based on CMS guidelines. And then just as we talked about with the organ donation process, the OPO assesses the individual for medical suitability, of course, before moving forward. And also, authorization and registration. Is there consent on behalf of the deceased, or did the deceased give consent in life? And also our call centers provide instructions for next steps moving forward. Post-donation, of course, the wishes of the family are honored. We commonly get questions about open casket funerals, and if I'm a donor, can I have an open casket funeral? And yes, an open casket is, of course, possible and normal following organ and tissue donation for those that chose that, or if the family had chosen to pursue that as an option to honor their loved one. We also have our aftercare department who works with donor and recipient families following donation as somewhat of a conduit of basic information relative to their loved one's donation or their loved one's their loved one's donation is probably the best way to put it. Sorry, I got a little tongue-tied there. Letters sent to the donor family explaining which organs were transplanted and which tissues were recovered. Organ donor families can correspond and even meet if both parties are ultimately willing. So we have instances where donor and recipient families meet, but they both have to agree to do so. And we have memorial events that honor our donors and the gift of life and their families annually. And quickly, again, just to highlight living donation before I turn it over to Raichon to share her story. Living donation is coordinated through the Transplant Center. Common forms of living donation, the most common form is living kidney donation. So somebody with 2 healthy functioning kidneys donates one of their kidneys to a recipient in need. Vanderbilt actually recently just started their living liver transplant program back up. So you can theoretically donate a portion of your liver as a living donor. The liver actually regenerates. So that's another thing we're starting to see in our area. Pretty amazing stuff. And you can also be, or a couple of things to highlight, an altruistic donor, which means somebody just says, hey, I've got 2 good kidneys. I want to help somebody. They don't know who they are, and they just, go through the process of becoming a living donor and ultimately donate to somebody they don't know. Or directed donation, actually knowing the person you're donating to and being willing to donate a kidney or a portion of your liver, which I'm sure many of you have heard stories or know somebody impacted by a situation just as that. So with the academic portion covered, highlighting a little bit about Tennessee Donor Services, Donate Life, and the highlights of transplant, I am now going to turn it over to Raichon Moran to share her story and what hope in Hendersonville means.
So I am very happy to be here. I am almost a lifelong resident of Hendersonville. My parents moved to Hendersonville actually so that my sister and I could go to Sumner County schools. So I am like the evolution of Hendersonville. I went to Wessington Elementary, which is now Witten, and then to Knox Dawes Junior High, which is kind of now Merrill High, but also now kind of Knox Dawes at Drakes Creek. And then I graduated from Beach High School a long time ago in 1991. Soon after college, I knew I had to get back home because this is where I belonged. And so now I live about 6 minutes from the house that I grew up in. While I was in college, I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, which is very rare to be diagnosed at that late age because I was 21 and a junior in college. Immediately, my first thought upon diagnosis was, well, I don't know if I need to continue getting my degree now because am I going to really need it? And I was in the process of shopping for a new car, and I thought, well, I don't need that new car for much longer, so I wasn't going to do that. But my attitude quickly turned around, and you'll see in a minute how I started living like I was dying. So let's get started. So my illness progression, you can really start to see me getting sick in 2010, where I was starting to just get very skinny and actually bony. That's me with my daughter. And getting to see this, you'll also get to see her grow up. And also my different hair colors throughout my life. And then in 2012, John, I'm trying to click it and it's not going. Can you click that forward?
Sure. Give it a try now.
There we go. In 2012, this is actually Sophia and me at the Great Strides Walk for Cystic Fibrosis in Sumner County. Her little shirt there says, "My mom is my hero." So that's one of my favorite pictures. And then 2 years later, or probably a year and a half, in April 2014, I'm quite waif again there, getting ready for a 4-H cornbread baking competition in Gallatin. And then about a year later, I think I'm looking a little bit better, as Sophia was finishing 5th grade. But then just 3 months later, you're not going to believe the quick decline. It's scary how quickly I declined there. So let's keep going, please.
Raichon, can you if you
Yeah,
can click it over now, just check. Sorry.
Okay, I'll check after this slide if that's okay. So this is the lobby of my office in Nashville. And this is where I would walk in to start work every day. I would, of course, click that first elevator button in between the first 2 elevators, and it never failed. The farthest elevator would open. And even though I was in such bad shape, I had a handicap placard, so I was able to park just outside the entrance to the building, and walking from the car to that first elevator absolutely wore me out. I didn't have the strength or the breath to walk that extra 10 or 12 feet to the other elevator. So I'd have to stand there, let that elevator go on its way, push the button again, and hope that one of the 2 closer elevators would come. So that is how bad my breathing was at that time. It's not going, John. There we go. So the picture on the left is the morning of my transplant. Let me give you a little bit of background about how I got there. So in 2009, I was put on oxygen at nighttime. No big deal. I thought, well, this will just last a few months and then I'll be okay. Well, it didn't. So from 2009 to 2015, I stayed on oxygen at night, but then around Father's Day, June of 2015, I started relying on the oxygen heavily at all times if I could not go without it. So I was changed to my oxygen tube at home. Whenever I had to come into Vanderbilt for doctor's appointments, I either struggled greatly or I carried my little portable oxygen tanks with me and hoped they didn't run out while I was there. But the night of August 21st of 2015, I couldn't sleep. And I realized the next day that it was because I couldn't catch my breath. So back then, because I coughed all the time, I had tissue boxes everywhere, like every 10 feet in my house. I had 2 boxes going up the steps so I could sit and rest and cough as I would go upstairs to go to bed every day. I had one by the couch in the living room, one in the kitchen, one in the bathroom, one by my bed, one in my car, one at my desk. Everywhere I had tissue because I always needed tissue to cough. So the night of August 21st, the only way I could sleep was to stand up that long box of tissue on its end, sit cross-legged, and lean over with my head resting on the end of the tissue box. And that's the only way I could breathe long enough to sleep, even for a few minutes. So the next day, once I realized that I was not getting any better and that I was not getting enough oxygen through my concentrator, I told my husband, I was like, we've got to go to the ER. So panicked, we called my mom to come get my daughter to take care of her, all of that. My husband rushed me to the ER, and I think I had a small basic bag packed because I knew that day was coming. Plus, I was listed for the transplant, so I was packed, ready to get my call. But he rushed me to the ER, and I was admitted. And let me tell you how wonderful they were. The valet helped me into the hospital, helped me from the car into a wheelchair, into the registration desk. They didn't even ask my name, but I saw a nurse and I said, "Excuse me, I'm waiting for a lung transplant and I can't catch my breath." He said, I will be right back. And, I thought, well, great. Here I am. I'm just going to die sitting here waiting in the ER. But before I could even finish that thought, he was back, and he was rushing me back there, had me on high pressure oxygen, and when I was getting 2 IVs in my arms. I knew I was good. Suddenly I could relax knowing that I could breathe. The picture on the right here is about 12 days after my transplant. So while I'm still skinny, of course, I feel like I have life back into me again. I'm going to try to go forward again. There we go. So this is 11 days after my transplant. And I have to tell you this little story. A few days before I was sent to the ER, some high school girlfriends came over to bring me lunch because I wasn't eating. It takes a lot of breath to eat. So they were bringing me food almost every day and sitting there with me. And honestly, I feel like they were afraid I was going to die. Sitting at home, my husband was at work as he needed to be. My daughter was at school where she needed to be. I just needed to rest. So they would come over and kind of pair up and watch me sleep and kind of talk and visit with me and things like that. Well, one day I knew I had to get on the treadmill because one of the requirements to be eligible for my transplant was walking 750 feet in 6 minutes. And let me tell you, I couldn't even stand up long enough to brush my teeth. So my husband moved the treadmill just to where my oxygen tube would reach. And so I was standing there with my little bony body, with my little slippers on and shorts, and just struggling to walk for 5 minutes on that treadmill. So we got together again this weekend, and we were talking about that very thing. So it's funny that I get to talk about it here. But my first day on the treadmill, I was so excited that I could actually walk for 20 or 30 minutes. I don't remember, but I nailed it. And if you remember the Roadrunner little legs on Bugs Bunny, how fast his legs would move, you couldn't even see him. It was a big fat circle. That's how I ended up walking before I left pulmonary rehab. I turned on my Michael Jackson radio in my headphones, and I would just truck it. And people would be laughing at me, but I didn't care because I could walk and I was loving it. So it definitely made a huge impact on me. So I do want to say my faith had a tremendous part of my story, and it still does. And I had a couple of very scary days in the hospital waiting for my lungs. But at 10:30 on August 30th, the nurse came in and was like, I'm so sorry to wake you up, but I have to tell you, you can't eat or drink anything. We have some lungs for you. So my mom was staying with me. We looked at each other like, is she serious? We really just hear that? And so this is at 5:30 in the morning the next morning. So I was so excited. Look how bony I am. But I was so excited because I knew I was going to live. And I was actually singing How Great Thou Art, as much breath as I could muster to sing it, and as poorly as I can sing it. But I just wanted the people there to know that I had hope, and so that there would be hope for them, and that my soul was singing and I couldn't control it. So I have this hanging next to my desk here so I can always remember that picture in that moment. So here are my x-rays. The one on the left is obviously before my transplant because you can see the scarring in my lungs. But the one on the right was, I think, taken or maybe the day after my transplant. They're perfectly clear and brand new, and they're just perfect. So even though I struggled waiting for my lungs, I strongly feel like I got the perfect pair of lungs for me. So this is another treadmill story. I had to stay about 10 minutes away from Vanderbilt for 2 or 3 months after my recovery, just in case something happened, so that we could get me back over there to get treatment immediately. Also, I had to have pulmonary rehab 5 times a week, and regular lab work and regular doctor's visits and all of that. So my daughter would come stay with me on the weekends, and the apartment complex we stayed in had this great gym. And so here we are, and I still have a Facebook page where I chronicled my story. called Rays of Hope. In my post that day, I'll read it out loud because it means a lot to me. Check it out. This is me and my healthy, energetic 11-year-old walking in rhythm with each other at a speed of 3 miles an hour. She kept looking over at me, grinning, saying things like, "You're not even using oxygen. This is so cool, and I love showing off my new legs and my new lungs. Thank you, Lord, and thank you to my donor." That was a special day. So this was a few days before my transplant with my sister. You can see she has a mask way back before COVID. I'll tell you more about her in a minute, but she had come to see me in the hospital almost every day. And on this particular day, my nurse said, "Hey, do you want to go outside?" And I said, "I absolutely want to go outside." You can see I was starving for daylight pretty badly, and I was literally knocking on heaven's door. And then fast forward 2 months later, on the next slide, where I'm thanking heaven for being able to get back to normal life. This is at a banquet for my husband's soccer team, so with my daughter again. So just a tremendous difference. And here is another image of the proof of the power of organ donation. You can clearly see where my lung function was declining, and bam, it started going up all of a sudden. It continues to go up. And right at my last lung function test, which was just about a month ago, was like 124% of expected. So I actually got lungs that were a little bit bigger than what's normal for a woman my size and my age. So I'm thankful to her for giving me that little extra oomph in my breathing. So here's some things I learned. And I mentioned earlier that I learned to live like I was dying, just like the Tim McGraw song says. I actually did go skydiving several times. I went rappelling, I rode an elephant just because I had an opportunity to do these things. I may or may not have driven a fire truck. There just really wasn't an opportunity I was going to let pass me by, because I knew I needed to embrace life as long as I had it. I also learned to strengthen my faith. There were some nights where I could not sleep because I was so scared. I was terrified of what my future may bring. But I got prayed up so much that I actually heard God's voice speak to me twice. And that's a long story, so I'll tell you about that if you want to reach out to me privately. But there was no doubt in my mind after a certain point when I heard God say, "I've got this." Like, all right, you're right. Take it, So that was cool. I learned to exercise because, like I still say, it ain't going to get any easier. Fitness was crucial for my recovery, and I actually had a fitness routine while I was healthy enough to have one. And then even when I wasn't healthy enough, I still tried to maintain as much as I could. But I still exercise regularly, more than ever, actually. And I just encourage everybody to at least do some kind of fitness, because if not, you're going to be approaching 50 like me and aching every move, and maybe even 60 and 70 and 80, and not be able to do the things you enjoy. So that's a huge lesson that I learned. So one thing that made me comfortable during my times of stress was that I made arrangements. I made my husband power of attorney, in case we had forgotten to finalize anything specific. We made our last will and testament. We made sure my daughter was done. That my daughter was going to be taken care of if something were to also happen to my husband and myself. And then I learned to laugh. This is really sad, but laughing takes breath. And I actually had to learn how to laugh again, because, for a long time I would just go, and that was my laugh. But gosh, it feels so good to laugh, and laughter really is fantastic medicine. And then there's one more. I learned to fight. I wasn't going to quit. That just wasn't an option for me. So I put on my imaginary Wonder Woman shield and my superpower bracelets, whatever they're called. And my hospital gown was my cape. So I was a superhero, and I was ready to fight to prevent my family from having to mourn my loss. I just wasn't going to have that yet. And then one last thing I did, one of the things that kept me up was thinking, oh my gosh, I need to make sure my daughter and my husband knows this, and I want to make sure I get the chance to tell them this and that. And, but it's uncomfortable to sit down and say, hey, 11-year-old daughter, I want to make sure you know all of these things in case I die next week. So instead, I got lots of little pieces of paper, and this is the actual jar that I gave my daughter. Every little piece of paper has something on there, like take care of your heart, and no one will love you like I love you. And, just different mom things that I wanted her to know. And then I did the same thing for my daughter. And then once I was put in the hospital, I told somebody where I'd hidden them and had them set them out on each of their nightstands. So if they wanted to hear something from me while I was in the hospital away from them, or during recovery after my transplant, because I was there for 2 months at least, that they could pick out a piece of paper and have something, from me. So that helped me relax and focus on my recovery, knowing that was there. I also learned to surrender. And like I said a moment ago, I heard God actually say, I've got this. So Philippians 4:6-7 says, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Jesus Christ. And that will forever be my favorite verse. And I've got another story. I'll tell you about that in a second. But it says everything about surrendering and being thankful for every circumstance, because you're growing, you're learning, and you're improving, even in the darkest spots. So one cool thing about my surgery and my story is, before I even opened my eyes, as soon as I was aware that, okay, I've had my transplant, the first thought I had was, whoa, this person must have been an athlete, because this is so easy to breathe. Before I even opened my eyes, it was absolutely incredible. And then I was overwhelmed with all of this gratitude. And I thought, I've got to scream from every mountaintop what God has done for me. So every time I get an opportunity to tell my story and to tell how much my organ donor and Tennessee Donor Services and the whole crew saved my life, I feel like this is a mountaintop for me. So thank you for being today's mountaintop. City of Hendersonville. So I want to feature some other Hendersonvillians that have had transplants as well. This is Courtney Nichols. She is also a native Hendersonvillian, actually born in Hendersonville Hospital. She was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis at the age of 13 and also graduated from Beach High School, but in 1998. And while her youth was shadowed by a constant need to take care of herself and to keep her lungs healthy, her young adulthood quickly began to show the true limitations of the disease. At the age of 31, she was listed for a double lung transplant with lung function in the teens. And within a month, she was well on her way to living her best life, including adopting 2 perfect, healthy, beautiful children. By the way, Courtney is my little sister, so I'm obviously and justifiably biased. Next, Ron Blanton has lived in Hendersonville for several years. He suffered from a kidney disease for many years until a stranger donated a kidney to him. While he has been reliant on dialysis for so long, he now has the freedom to live a normal life, often on the golf course, like he dreamed of for so long. Now, Nikki McDonald, she was 21. She became so sick, also from cystic fibrosis, that she wasn't sure how much time she had left. Fortunately, she received her lungs in 2018, and she now lives a normal life. This is Andie Lee Perona, and she is now a Donate Life ambassador with Tennessee Donor Services as well. She also graduated from Beach High School in 1998 and was diagnosed with diabetes when she was 14. If that wasn't enough, she was diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease when she was 21. Because the wait for a kidney is so long, she was put on the list for a kidney when she first went on dialysis in 2014. She was soon added to the list for a combination kidney pancreas transplant. She got married about 2 weeks after she was put on the list and had the ultimate wedding gift of her life-saving transplant 3 days after her wedding. There could be no better honeymoon than to have the hope of a healthy future with her new husband. Andie Lee works in transplant operating rooms, so her passion for organ donation is as strong as it could possibly be. This is Bill Knox. He had diabetes as well and waited for many years, chained to his home for dialysis for many hours a day. And his family, his children and grandchildren are extremely grateful for his donor. This is Anthony Vittier. So I may get emotional again. I don't know Anthony, but I met his wife uniquely at my hair salon. She was in the chair when I got there waiting for my appointment one day, and my stylist said, "Oh, Raichon, I'm so glad you're here. This is Angie, and her husband's been waiting for a kidney." I was like, "Oh," and I just started, asking her questions. How long has he been waiting? Well, he's been waiting for 3 years, and she was telling me all of this stuff. And I said, "He'll get his call this week. I'm confident." And then I thought, I'm not sure I really should have said that. Where did that come from, And I just didn't really think much of it. Well, my stylist called 2 days later and said, "You're not going to believe it. Anthony Vittier got his new kidney." So the very next day, after I randomly, and I'm sure it was the Holy Spirit, I hope you believe in that, but I felt like the words were put in my mouth and I was giving her hope. And I actually quoted Philippians 4:6-7 to her, to have faith and be thankful and not have fear and all of this stuff. And she called me and told me how much it meant to her. And strangely, I had just memorized that memory verse in my Bible study. So it was just all a glorious orchestration of events. But it was just insane that he got his kidney like 2 days after I assured his wife that they would get the call. So, but all of these are Hendersonvillians. So our OPO, Tennessee Donor Services and Donate Life Tennessee, has had a tremendous impact on Hendersonvillians. And these are just the ones that I know of. I'm sure there are a dozen or so more that I haven't had the pleasure of getting to know. But just in my tiny little circle, I know this many. So it's pretty special, the impact that organ donation has had on all of us.
Sure, and I've been amazed. Recently, we just had a new ambassador who was actually an employee in a different area near me, but he's from Hendersonville, and he just received a kidney transplant as well. So like you said, these are certainly not everybody, but it just gives you how many Hendersonvillians have been impacted by donation. And when we think about the recipients and the lives saved, in everything we do, we always think about front of our minds. And these are some photos that were submitted by donor families across the state of what the gift means and honoring the gift of life given. And these are some of our donors, just a few in Tennessee. But anytime you meet a recipient, or just like you heard Raichon's story, how beautiful it is, how much hope she has now. This is what hope looks like. And these are the people that gave hope, just some of the people. And these are some of the people, again, that received the gift of life. Always like to put faces to names and or put faces behind what the gift means. Raichon's there in the bottom left with her daughter. But these are some ambassadors and volunteers and recipients that we work with across the state. They're part of why we do what we do. how to register, we talked about consent and authorization a little bit, but at the Department of Safety, and forgive me if I didn't talk about this a little bit more earlier, but we'll bet on that a little bit now. So we partner with driver service centers across the state. Here in Gallatin, Susan Gaskell's is a station manager, and she's a great partner, always willing to participate in Donate Life events. She has, there's Donate Life information throughout the office, just as there is throughout state driver service centers. But you have the opportunity to register as an organ and tissue donor when you fill out your application. Hopefully today, if you haven't already, or if you have, that only solidifies your decision. But now you are an informed decision maker when it comes to registering as an organ and tissue donor. So when you're at the Driver Service Center, you have the opportunity. Also, our registry website, donatelifetn.org. It's a super easy way. And honestly, my preferred method to do so, but you can register as an organ and tissue there. You can even state specific organs and tissues you would or would not like to donate, and update any information at any time you would like to once you've made that initial entry. Also, the National Registry, registerme.org, or as we talked a little bit about, advanced directives and living wills. Of course, you can set your decision around registering or donating organs and tissues there as well. And probably most importantly is discussing your wishes with family or whoever helps aid in your decision-making process. So when the time comes, your wishes can be honored and they know how you feel, because those are difficult decisions to make on somebody's behalf. So just being clear about what you want to do is truly important. So that's all we have today. Raichon, thank you so much for sharing your story. Truly beautiful, and I think you at the city are really lucky to have gotten here today. Remember to sign up, save lives, and Raichon, I'll turn it over to you for anything you'd like to say to close.
I just always appreciate having mountaintops, like I mentioned a minute ago. So thank you to John and Tennessee Donor Services for giving me the opportunity to speak again, and for the city of Hendersonville for being willing to listen to how much this mission means to me and to all of the people I mentioned. It's not just impacting the people I mentioned, but all of our families, you know, like Courtney, my sister specifically, probably had 15 people that stayed in the ER, in the waiting room all night long during her surgery. And I'm told I had the same amount. So not to mention all of the distant family, you know, that would have mourned, and friends and coworkers and all of that. So we're all just so blessed with a tremendous support system. And hopefully each of our support system members have now registered to be organ donors so that they can pass on that gift of life someday.
And one more thing to add, on November 19th and 20th, I'll be at the city office, the city of Hendersonville. So any questions you have, if you need help with registry questions, anything you need, I'll be on site to answer those. So I look forward to seeing you all. And again, if you need me for anything, don't hesitate to reach out. And my wife works at the office, so I'm pretty easy to find regardless. Thank you all, and look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you, guys.
Sorry.